All yours.
Okay, so well, thank you for having me. This is actually a really fun talk for me. This intersection of art and science and technology has been a deep interest of mine since high school, actually. And I usually don't get to talk from the perspective of an artist. I'm usually coming from some other vantage point, engineering or science or something like that. And so the talk today is kind of a fun one for me because it's kind of like show and tell. I'm going to talk just about a few of the different projects I've done and tell you about them and just share, hopefully, or at least exude some of my excitement. But a little background first. So my background is in robotics, actually looking at human-robot interaction, sort of the social side of robotics. And one of the big things I took away from this was understanding the incredible impact that these systems can have on human experience. But what I eventually came to later was really thinking about, and this is a much longer story, what is the greatest impact? What's the greatest positive benefit that I could imagine technology having on human beings? And what I personally came to was similar conclusions that you see both in the positive psychology side of the fence, but also in contemplative traditions, Buddhist traditions, Hindu traditions. This idea of what is our ultimate human potential? What is this idea of ultimate human flourishing? And so what I've been doing for the past 5 or 6 years has revolved around this exploration of how technology can support the ultimate potential of human well-being or human happiness, sort of like engineering enlightenment, you could say. And so within that umbrella, I've had a number of different explorations, but really my heart has been focused on this exploration of human connection, right? So it's not just about individual well-being, but believe it or not, we're not separate, right? We live in societies, we live in families, we live in cultures. We're connected to everyone and everything around us. And so this interpersonal aspect of well-being is actually hugely important. But that's not just my opinion. Turns out the science agrees. But one of the motivating forces for me is, from a technological perspective, is we're actually more connected now than we've ever been. But something is missing. So there's over 2.3 billion people that are on social networks. But the AARP estimates that we're 2 to 4 times lonelier than we were 50 years ago. So something's wrong. And as it turns out, in connection, it's not the quantity of connection that matters, but it's actually the quality, right? So if you think about the most intimate or meaningful or memorable experience you've had with another person, how much of that was about the content or the information or a tweet or a text? And how much of that was about a felt experience? Something that may even be difficult to describe in words, right? This is not just like to add a little frosting on the cake of human life. It turns out that deep and meaningful human connection is important for our basic well-being. There's a study called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. It's a 75-year-long, still ongoing longitudinal study. It's the most significant study in human well-being ever conducted, longitudinal study in human well-being ever conducted. And the primary outcome is really interesting. So Dr. George Valiant, he was the principal investigator on the study. And he has a quote, which is his sort of synopsis. He says, "The warmth of relationships throughout life have the greatest positive impact on life satisfaction." This was the conclusion from this sort of heroic 75-year study. And he sums it up in a really beautiful sentence. He says, "Happiness is love. Full stop." And so what I'm interested in is in this ever-changing, ever-accelerating human environment that we live in, where technology is becoming increasingly ubiquitous. How can we ensure that technology, which I don't believe is optional, right? How can we ensure that technology is in the greatest support of human well-being and deep and meaningful human connection, the kind of connection that we really need to thrive on this planet? So this is kind of my little background here. So I'm going to go through 3 projects. Good time. I'm going to go through 3 projects. This is the first one, and it's going to be a little bit of a story arc. These are all chronological, so it's kind of like my progress, what I've learned, and how I've progressed through these 3 projects exploring technology-facilitated human connection. The first one is called HeartSync. And the idea here is or I should say, here was the approach for this project, right? First, to try to understand what's the science of human connection, right? Can I find some meaningful correlates in the brain, in the body, that when two people are connected, this is what it looks like, right? It's sort of a picture of it. And in that research, what I discovered is that, and this is actually my data from the HeartSync project, but it looks very similar from this study. They take two people that are in a romantic relationship with each other. They sit them next to each other, and they don't say anything. The two people are not talking to each other. They're just sitting next to each other in silence. And what invariably happens is that their respiration synchronizes, but also their heart rate variability synchronizes, meaning the change in heart rate over time. And that's actually, do I have a laser?
No red one.
I'll get you a laser.
No, I started using one. There's one on the end. Anyway, it's okay. Somewhere on here is a laser. But anyway, so what you see here is, see how the, okay, so you can guess where I'm trying to.
Lions operating one.
Look at that, great.
It's a red button.
So, oh, there is one here, okay. I knew it. I tried every button but the right one. So see how these little dots are when heartbeats happen, right? And then the height is the heart rate. So this dot might be 70 beats per minute. This dot might be, 60 beats per minute, 50 beats per minute, right? And so your heart rate is constantly changing as time goes on. Now notice, this is when three people begin a sort of a rhythmic, a sort of a breathing meditation together. And you can see that, like sine waves, the change in heart rate over time actually begins to sync up. This is what happens spontaneously when two people are in an intimate connection with each other, just sit next to each other. The rhythm of their heart syncs up. And so the idea behind this project was, can I design a system that would facilitate the process of a group of people coming into this heart rate variability synchrony, essentially trying to reverse engineer the physiological correlates of human connection. And so I'm going to play for you a delightfully cheesy video. Actually, I kind of want to mute the sound, because the sound makes it twice as cheesy. Okay, so the way this works is the way this project works. You take up to 6 people. These sensors they're putting on their ear, these are actually measuring the pulse, and then they actually look at a screen. And so this is a representation of this red figure is a representation of that person's heart rate variability pattern. And so when it's small and condensed, that individual person has a change in heart rate that looks more erratic. As this shape grows and expands, it means that that person's heart rate variability is becoming more sinusoidal, which is a measure of, first of all, greater heart rate variability, which is healthy, but it's also a measure of physiological balance, a natural shift with the respiration and a change between sympathetic and parasympathetic dominance. But now you see a few other colors showing up. So there's a yellow and there's a blue. That would mean that in this system there's now 3 people that are using it. And now see how this white shows up in the middle? What that means is that the system reached this threshold point where all 3 people's biosignals came into this sort of rhythmic resonance. And it automatically results in them falling in love. They never even met each other before. Let's see if I can, okay. Let's see, thinking. Let's see, there we go. So, and of course, no project is official until you take it to Burning Man. So that's my important Burning Man picture. And this is the current stage of the project. So this is actually on permanent installation at the Tech Museum in San Jose. And so you have like 13 and 14-year-olds who get bussed in from schools. They've never heard of meditation. They've maybe even never paid attention to their breath before. And essentially what this system does is it guides them through a group meditation process where the only way to win is by getting into this synchronized, balanced physiological state in connection with the other person. Now, the interesting, so that's the HeartSync project. Now, what I want to do is kind of take a little interlude here to introduce a couple ideas. So, I'm going to sort of kind of double the use of this word bias here in this context for this sort of feedback system and define it as the degree to which a system is driving towards a predefined goal state. So, if you remember, the starting point for this HeartSync project was that I had this physiological correlate for human connection, and I was trying to use this audio-visual feedback to drive the group of people towards that state, right? It turns out that that's a typical way that biofeedback is done. It's quite common. It's actually the way we do a lot of stuff, right? But it has a downside. There's actually a phenomenon called biofeedback-induced anxiety, right? And what you'd find is that all of a sudden you're looking at the screen and you're realizing, oh, the dude who's yellow is way more zenned out than I am. I'm the blue one, and now all of a sudden I'm more anxious, and then I try to relax harder, and it totally fails. And so there's a dark side to this process. And so what I was interested in now exploring is this idea of unbiased feedback. Can you create a system that instead of trying to drive someone to a specific state, instead acts as a form of physiological self-reflection? Like a sort of an idealized form of meditation, where you're really actually just neutrally observing. This is like the idea of mindfulness, right? You're just noticing what's arising, and can technology actually support that process of noticing what's arising instead of trying to actually get you somewhere? And so I created this project called Connectome. And the way that this works is you have this dome-like environment. It's important to have these beautiful women. She's in the back. This is my wife. And so this is this multi-sensory environment where both people are wearing sensors that measure their respiration. They're wearing sensors that measure their pulse. And then they have lighting, and they have sound, and they have vibration that feeds back to them. And the idea here is that each person can actually see and hear the other person's breath, as sound and light in the space. And each person can actually feel the other person's heartbeat vibrating their body through a personal subwoofer. So this is like a little glimpse of what it looks like. Oh, I need this out. But the idea here is that this actually naturally supports the process of respiratory synchronization, because you're seeing the other person's breath, and the system naturally goes to darkness when both people are exhaling, and naturally goes to brightness when both people are inhaling. It actually, that was a little harsh, the video and sound, but it's a lot more peaceful when you're inside it. And so the interesting thing here is there's no points, there's no goal, there's no end state you're trying to get to. It's really just a process of technological assisted self-awareness or self-reflection. There we go. And obviously, had to go to Burning Man for it to be real. This was an earlier phase of the project where I did the craziest thing, which was bike around like a 300-pound project around this desert. Don't ever do that. So now the last project I'm going to talk to you about is really the hybrid and evolution of these last two projects. So this is called the Group Flow project, and this is actually different in a lot of senses. It's different in the scope in terms of the collaborations we have on this project, the funding we have on this project, the bigger picture vision we have for this project, but it's different in terms of the breadth of the platform, what we're sort of technically capable of doing with this project. So this is actually an experiment we ran 2 nights ago. We actually have 2 Stanford professors. This is Anil, who's the founder of Wellness Ed, where I've been teaching, which is under the medical school. And this is actually Matt Wright, who's the technical director at Karma, which is the computer music program at Stanford. Matt is a collaborator on the project, and so is Anil. And these are a bunch of just a crazy cast of characters. And this is the rat's nest of what this system looks like. It's in a beautiful stage of prototype. And it's an incredibly complex system. And I'll give you a description of the setup, and then I'll sort of paint the picture for you of what it would be like to use this thing. Okay? So first of all, we have this sets of inputs and outputs in the system, right? I should say the system can accommodate up to 24 people at the same time. So unlike the dome, which could do 2 people, and unlike the Hartzing, which could do 6 people, this can actually do an entire room full of people. This is actually just 16 people here. And what the system has is kind of the way that it can listen and the way it can talk back. Is first it has a room speaker, so you can have sound kind of throughout the entire room. It has this central light which can display information. And then it has this sort of main control software where all the data from all these individual sensors feeds back into this main system. I'm already realizing I need to come up with a less confusing way of presenting this project. Okay, let's see if you get this. So now, for each individual person, this is what you have, okay? You have a pair of headphones, so you can have your own unique personalized sound. You have this is a BioPack sensor amplifier. BioPack is one of the main companies that makes physiological sensing technology for universities and research labs. So it's very high quality sensors. We can measure galvanic skin response. We can measure respiration through temperature. We can measure EEG, ECG, EMG, and we can measure respiration through a strap. And every single person has their own individualized lighting setup. And this is a horrible picture, but this gives you a sense of kind of the feeling of it while it's running, which is that everyone has their own personal light in front of them. Usually they would be different. There's this main light in the room running, and then everyone has personalized sound and room sound. And so, yeah, let me give you a sense of like what would happen on a typical evening, right? So the way this evening started is first everyone puts their headphones on, and we fade in the sound and we fade in the light. And each person begins by just hearing their own heartbeat, and then seeing their own heartbeat pulsing on their own personalized light in front of them. Then we can set the system where everyone then turns to their neighbor. Then we can crossfade the sound. So each person is now hearing the opposite person's heartbeat while seeing the other person's heartbeat through the light. Then we ask people to take their headphones off. And then for the way this is set up is it's a collaboration between human facilitator and technology. So the guy sitting over here, you can't see him, his name is Dustin DePerna, and he's an amazing meditation teacher. And so now he guides the group through a breath meditation, but the whole time his respiration is being monitored. And then his respiration is coming through the speakers as ocean waves and pulsing the light through the room. Then everyone can actually hear, if they put their headphones on, the delta between their respiration and his respiration. So if their mind wanders and they lose track of breathing along with him, then they get a gentle tone to bring them back into synchrony with him. Then, so I'm trying to give you the sense, there's actually 1,000 different things that you can do with this platform, right? So then you could actually break up into groups of 4. Everyone could put their headphones back on, and now you could have the sound isolated into those groups of 4. And then you can have each person with a different instrument connected to their breath. And so everyone can be hearing all 4 people's breathing, and you can go through a process of just listening to each other's breath and meditating with it, or actually beginning to bring that breath into synchrony. So all of that is this unbiased form of feedback. But the interesting thing is we can also do biased forms of feedback. So for example, we're collaborating with a guy named Arnaud Delorme, who is the author of a popular toolkit called EEG Lab, which is probably one of the most popular used MATLAB toolkits. He's one of the collaborators on the project, and he's designing a module for us to calculate brainwave synchrony. Brainwave synchrony is a really interesting measure which shows up when people are really engaged with each other, really connected with each other. Their brainwaves in certain contexts actually go into phase synchrony. And so we can actually begin to measure that in this context, and we can give real-time feedback on any pairing or any combination of the entire group's brainwave synchrony, right? So this, what I just described to you is like a tour of the 10,000 different things that we can do with this platform. Okay, and in the last minute, I will wrap up. And so the vision of this platform is twofold. One, that first of all, it's an open source platform with the intention of furthering the science of human connection, and two, the development of new interventions that support human connection. So from a scientific perspective, this actually, believe it or not, is one of the only platforms in the world that allows for fully synchronized collection of data from as many as 24 people at the same time. And when I say synchronized, I mean microsecond level synchronization. So you can look at things like gamma brainwaves or very fast changing things and understand how they relate from person to person. It's also a fairly inexpensive system, so it's around $300 to $400 per person. But the other part of it is, the hope is that universities and research labs begin to build this system and begin to explore different types of modalities, different forms of feedback, different forms of stimulus that can actually guide people to different states of connection, whether that's group flow, whether that's collaboration. We're having some casual conversations with Google, for example, or other companies that I can't mention, that are also interested in technology that could be used to increase the efficiency and connection among groups of people working together, right? So obviously we also had to take this to Burning Man. Some more Burning Man pictures for fun. It was not snowing, that's just what happens. And then mid-November we actually have a technology augmented meditation retreat that we're running at Esalen, which as far as I know is one of the very first times anything like this has happened. And again, this is a human-machine hybrid. And so we have a meditation instructor, but right now the meditation instructor is coming over to my house weekly to practice with the technology, to explore how do you dance with the technology so that it can actually improve this meditation process. And for me, this is just the beginning. This project isn't so that we can get 24 people to get into resonance. For me, the goal of this project is to figure out the deep correlates of human connection and to understand the mechanics of how that can be catalyzed. And once you can do that, I want to see that enabled through Skype, through Facebook, through online distant interactions, and ultimately I want to see that happen for 1 billion people simultaneously. I would love to see a technological nervous system that acts to actually connect people at the heart level, at the level of the felt experience. And my hope is that technology can actually be a catalyst for a global unitive perspective.